govern. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, good. I'd love to imagine that warm applause was for me. However, I think we all know the truth of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much on behalf of the Fabienne Society, of which I'm an executive committee member, and on behalf of Hope and Hate, of which I am a strong supporter. I want to thank you all for coming this morning to our event with Gordon Brown. By way of introduction, I just want to set out the situation that we face, because for those of us on the left of British politics, I think that we face, in the current political situation, a challenge that we have never faced before in our political history. Because throughout our history on the left, we have always understood the people that we're standing against. Though we did not agree with Margaret Thatcher very much, we knew at least what we stood for. We didn't agree with her ideas about individualism or the primacy of the market, but we at least knew what she stood for. And throughout time, we have understood what Conservatives believed and why we disagreed with them. But, as seems likely at the moment, with the election of Boris Johnson by a tiny sliver of the British population that is the Tory party membership, we face somebody completely different. Because for the first time, we'll have a Prime Minister who I don't believe thinks anything at all. I don't think he has any strong beliefs at all. I think the only thing that really matters to Boris Johnson is Boris Johnson. And that's why this is a challenge for us like never before. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to warmly welcome our speaker for this morning. He's a great man. I've often said that if you're somebody who does public speaking, that speaking in front of him is a bit like being an amateur footballer playing in front of Ken Dalglish. Although for followers of football who know the connection between Liverpool, my team, and Scotland, Gordon's team, I might change that to Andy Robertson. But though he is one of the greats of our politics, he is somebody who has never stepped back or hid away when it was time for making a hard argument and for the most difficult of fights. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Gordon Brown.
First of all, it's a pleasure to be back in London. It's a pleasure to speak at a meeting organised by two great organisations, the Fabienne Society, that have kept alive progressive ideas over a whole century and more, and Hope Not Hate, which is doing so much good work to build community relations in this country. And I'm proud to be here this morning, not only to do what some politicians don't do, give speeches in the open, answer questions, but I'm also pleased to be here because it is important to reflect on what is happening to our country. I've never seen our country so divided, Parliament so deadlocked, the governing party in such a state of disintegration. And if you just recall what has been said by Conservative candidates for leadership over the last 2 weeks, you've got the Environment Secretary admitting now that they failed to do enough on the environment. You've got the former Health Minister admitting that they failed to do enough on social care. You've got the Foreign Secretary today saying they failed to do enough on defence. You've got a whole series of candidates saying they failed to do enough on the public services generally. They're admitting that over 9 years there is a record of failure, even when they haven't talked about the most serious problems facing the country, the rise of poverty, the rise of inequality, the growth of food banks, and of course what we will see this summer, holiday hunger. And this is a Conservative party that said they would bring strong and stable government. Remember David Cameron? That the choice in 2015 is between strong and stable government and chaos under Ed Miliband. Well, who produced the chaos? The Conservative Party with their present policies. And now, as Alison has just said, we have this prospect of the Conservative Party party membership, electing a leader, they come nearest to being the first political party in history not to have any members. Look at the percentage. 0.345% of the electorate are going to choose the next Prime Minister. I'll round it up, 0.35% of the electorate choosing the next Prime Minister. Do you know there were more people voted to choose the government and the Prime Minister before the first Reform Act of 1832 than are choosing the Prime Minister under this particular system today? Lord Balfour, who used to be a Conservative leader, said he would rather let his servant decide the issues than the membership of the Conservative Party, and now it's probably only the Lord Balfours that are deciding the policy of this country as members of the Conservative Party today. And I think you saw one observer writing that they are now choosing who's to be the next Prime Minister of the country. It's not a question of the tail wagging the dog, it's a question of one hair of the tail wagging the tail that is wagging the dog. And that's the situation we're now in. I want to speak about what I think is the biggest existential question of all, and that is whether our country can hold together, whether we can remain united as a country. And it's not just a question about Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. It's a question about the whole country, including England. It's about whether we can uphold the values, being tolerant, being fair-minded, being outward-looking, being respectful of diversity, that have distinguished this country over many years and are responsible for the success of a multinational state over many centuries. A tolerant country must not become an intolerant country. An outward-looking country must not turn in on itself. A country that has been inclusive and, because of being inclusive, diverse, must not become a country that is rooted in prejudice, discrimination, the manufacture of division, the targeting of others to blame, and of course, declaring minorities enemies of the people. You can love your country, that's patriotism, without hating your neighbours, which is narrow nationalism. And I want to say 4 things today that I think are important to the debate about the future of the country. First of all, about a no-deal Brexit. What the Conservative Party, influenced by Nigel Farage, have done, as I was saying a minute, is they've hijacked patriotism, and they've tried to make what is an act of economic self-harm, a no-deal Brexit, into a test of true patriotism, and that if you don't pass it by October the 31st, you're betraying your country. And we have got to argue against that. Secondly, the debate in this country has got to be about fairness again. It's got to be about what's happening to the state of our towns, the state of our manufacturing, to poverty, inequality, the condition of the people, as well as about immigration and sovereignty, questions that were raised by Brexit. And I believe that there is a way that we can bring the whole of the country into this debate through citizens' assemblies that should be held in every region of the country. And third, we have to fight the intolerance that is now a feature of our country and a feature of the rhetoric, particularly of the right, but not exclusively the right. And I believe that the Equality and Human Rights Commission's proposal of 2016, that the government, whatever government, needs a new strategy on community relations that builds from education in the school to new laws to outlaw discrimination, is what we should be pushing to root out, yes, Islamophobia on the right, but also anti-Semitism on the left, and root out any forms of racism in our society. And fourthly, I'm going to argue that we should regard the Union and this integrity of it as not just an issue for Scotland or an issue for Wales or an issue for Northern Ireland, but I have said an issue for the whole of this country, because we survive best and thrive best by multinational cooperation instead of economic wars within our own set of islands. And I want to start by illustrating this problem of intolerance and prejudice and discrimination and what I worry about the manufacture of division by giving you an example from what is happening in Scotland today. Unnoticed, without any publicity of any great effect in the rest of the United Kingdom, the Scottish National Party have changed their policy on independence, and it's important we know now what it is. From a position in 2014 when they supported what you might call a soft version of independence, just as we moved from a soft to hard Brexit, they've moved to a hard and extreme version of independence. You see, in 2014, they said they would remain part of the political union. They would leave the political union of the United Kingdom, but remain part of the UK currency, the UK single market, and the UK customs union. So they were leaving one union, they said, but they were staying in three others, as well as what they called the social union. Now, in 2019, their policy is completely different. Their policy is to create a separate Scottish pound. The policy is to leave the UK customs union. Their policy is to leave the UK single market. Their policy would lead to a hard border between Scotland and England, despite their attempt to deny this, and the trade between the two countries, which is so important, as well as the interaction of people, would be set back for centuries. And just at the time when the Scottish National Party have moved to this more extreme version of independence, we find that instead of all the other parties coming together to defend the values that underpin the union, values of cooperation, solidarity, and reciprocity, and empathy between our countries, we have the party that claims to be the Conservative and Unionist Party ditching that title and now becoming the Conservative and Brexit Party. Now, I don't know if you've seen that survey of Conservative Party members. Of course, it's a pretty unrepresentative group, as I said. But 59% said that they would prefer to have a Brexit and lose the union with Northern Ireland, if that for them was a price worth paying for Brexit. And 63%, nearly 2 in every 3 of Conservative members, are saying that Brexit, for the sake of Brexit, breaking the union with Scotland is a price worth paying. And you may think that's an aberration for a small group of Conservative voters. But another poll has been done of Conservative supporters, the people who vote Conservative, diminishing that, of course, but people who vote Conservative. 75% and more would see the breaking up of the union as a price worth paying for Brexit. Half of the Conservative membership say that the right thing to do is to exclude Scottish members of Parliament in this United Kingdom from membership of the UK cabinet. They're so perverse that 24% of Conservative Parliament members, voters in Scotland, Conservative voters in Scotland, now think that Scots should be excluded from the UK Parliament. So here you have a situation where we have one extreme, a new form of nationalism that would break all the economic links with the United Kingdom in a way that would be damaging to everybody, and a new form of extreme conservatism. But that is just one illustration of what's happening in this country. Nigel Farage. Now, Nigel Farage presents himself as a guy you would love to have a drink with in the park. Or more likely, the guy that would talk you into buying him a drink in the park. But does Nigel Farage stand for the values that we identify with being British? Tolerance, respect for diversity, outward-looking, internationalists engaged with the world, fair-minded. When you look at what Nigel Farage brings to the politics of this country and the votes that he's now receiving in his advocacy, as he says, he's not just talking about what kind of Brexit now, he's talking about what kind of Britain he wants to achieve. Let's look at it. Everybody knows about that infamous poster about people moving from Slovenia to Croatia, mainly non-white people, featured who were mainly refugees, as if they were migrants about to descend on British shores, that he published just before the European referendum. But look at his record in other areas. He says he feels uncomfortable sitting next to someone who is a non-white person when he's on a train. He says that he would have a referendum if ever there were to be Muslim mosques being built in a particular area, and he's uncomfortable with the idea of large mosques. He wants to ban European studies in British universities, hardly evidence of freedom of speech. As far as fairness is concerned, he attacks the existing equality and human rights laws in our country. At a time when the Me Too movement had put on the agenda the case for women's equality being taken far more seriously and women's rights being protected, he wants to abolish statutory maternity pay. And when it comes to the National Health Service, he is very much part of that debate that President Trump entered when he was in this country. He would privatise the National Health Service and he would throw its dismembered parts to his friends in the stock market. This is the Nigel Farage that we are dealing with. And when it comes to being outward-looking, anything with the title European or internationalist in it is something that he would deplore and deter. And the problem is that Nigel Farage's views are not just the views of Nigel Farage of the Brexit Party. Look at the survey that Hope Hate did just last week, in the last few days, about Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. Yes, and I'm going to say this, we have got to deal with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and root it out. But the Conservative Party face a problem on Islamophobia when only 8% of the members say they would be proud if a member of Parliament became Prime Minister who was a Muslim. When 50% say there are no-go areas in this country, 70% say there are areas that are governed by Sharia law and who believe that Islamophobia or Islamism is a threat to this country. But I suppose that nowhere is it more obvious of the connection between the views of Nigel Farage and the views of Boris Johnson and many in the Conservative Party than what is happening in this debate over a no-deal Brexit. You see, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson agree that we have to leave by October the 31st. They hold the position, both of them. They both hold the view that we should leave with no deal if necessary. That is their view, and they would welcome a no deal if that was to be the option available and the only one. Boris Johnson has gone further, and he said that he would withhold the money that we are owed in the European Union and withhold back some of that 39 billion. And obviously, as a result of that, he would be declaring an economic war within Europe in our future trading relationships. But you see, the Cabinet Secretary published a paper only a few weeks ago saying that there would be immediately a 10% increase in food prices as a result of a no deal. The companies would go under and have to be bailed out, that a recession was the likely result of any no deal, that the peace process in Northern Ireland would be put at risk, that the integrity of the United Kingdom and the union with Scotland would become an issue, and all the economic and political reasons for a no deal have been put forward, and nobody has been able to contest that. And whenever Boris Johnson is interviewed about where he has been unable to answer the questions about what WTO arrangements that he proposes actually mean, and why there isn't an implementation period when you're not subject to tariffs, as he has alleged. But you know, the most important thing about this debate is what they are attempting to do is to present to the British people the idea of a no-deal Brexit, which is an act of economic self-harm, which is damaging to the national interest and runs counter to the national interest, as somehow a patriotic act. And that if you don't support a no-deal by October 31st, you're in some way betraying Britain. And this is where the debate about the future of our country has gone, and this is where we have got to say we accept no more of this. To present no deal, that economic self-harm, as a patriotic act and a betrayal of the British people is something that is so counter to the common sense approach to politics and the pragmatism that Britain has long been heralded for around the world, that all of us, and I believe even the Brexit voters, will start to say that this is not the way that we define patriotism in our country. And you know, when it comes to Boris Johnson and what he's saying about other aspects of policy, I think we have got to give the country a wake-up call. I can just give you these examples of what he is saying about Scotland. This is not a sort of aberration on the part of Boris Johnson, something that he has said in the heat of a referendum campaign in Scotland. Over 20 years, he has challenged vehemently and opposed the fundamental tenets of the union and the relationship, the modern relationship between Scotland and Britain. He opposes, well, we know he opposes a Scot ever being Prime Minister, because he said that. I wasn't actually thinking he was opposing me at that time. It was Michael Gove he was trying to get. But he opposes Scottish representation at its present level in the United Kingdom Parliament. Now, in every country in the world, and I just make this point, America, Canada, Australia, allowance is made for minorities in the population. The American Senate, for example, Delaware, 500,000 citizens, 2 senators, California, 35 million citizens, has 2 senators. In every country, allowance is made for minorities. But Boris Johnson argues that Scottish representation is too high and should be substantially reduced. Second, he does not believe that the Scottish Parliament should have the powers it has, and he has specifically targeted universities and social care as areas where the Scottish Parliament should be prevented from using or having the powers that it now has. And then thirdly, the Barnett Formula, which is the linchpin of the Union, the financial settlement that is based on different needs and changing demography. He has said that he opposes this. It's unfair to England, it's reckless, it's a gift to Scotland that is unjustified, and so he will undermine and perhaps change the 3 tenets of the Union. Now, where does that take you? Remember David Cameron in 2015, and the poster by the guru that he had for that election, Lyndon Crosby. And remember that poster that was Ed Miliband in the pocket of the leader of the Scottish National Party. And remember that poster that was designed to whip up English antagonism to the possibility of Scots having an influence in the United Kingdom. Well, Lyndon Crosby is still advising Boris Johnson. And you can imagine the next election. A Jeremy Corbyn minority government, they will claim, would be in the pockets of the Scottish National Party, that they would force the elimination of Trident, probably, and then force a referendum of Scottish independence, and a Labour government would be powerless to stop this. And you can imagine the posters already, and the political party broadcasts already. Now, of course, it's right to point out there are dangers in a policy of unilateral nuclear disarmament. It's right also to point out that the Scottish national policy of independence is wrong. It's right also to point out that Labour should never enter a pact with a party that is hell-bent on destroying the very integrity and unity of the United Kingdom. But that's not the purpose of the posters that Lyndon Crosby and Boris Johnson will put up at the next election. The whole purpose is to win off English sentiment against Scotland, to win electoral votes, even at the price of the Union. And I think we have got to be aware that separating community from community, dividing community from community, undermining the very essence of shared ideas and mutual interests and common values in the United Kingdom is very much the agenda that is being pursued by the right in this country at the moment. So I have 4 very specific proposals, and I want just to explain them. The first is, all of us, and we've got to persuade Brexit voters of this, must oppose a no-deal Brexit. And there must be the biggest campaign possible to stop a no-deal Brexit, not just because it's wrong economically, as I've explained, but it is an attempt to hijack patriotism and to make what seems to me to be an act of economic harm and self-harm into an act of patriotism that cannot be justified on any reasonable assessment of the British national interest. So I think for all supporters here of both the Remain campaign, but even supporters of Brexit, who can understand now the economic damage that will be done, it is important that we lead a campaign to stop a no-deal Brexit on October the 31st, and to argue, because these arguments are not simply about economics, they're about culture, and to argue that it is divisive and that it will mean that people will be fighting each other across the country over this very big issue of Brexit in terms of rhetoric and in terms of campaigning. It will divide the country. The second thing I want to suggest is that we do have these debates in the country, and if others in the government will not promote them, citizens' hearings, then we, the Labour movement, should promote them around the country, so that people in their own areas, in forums, that can have an informed debate and not simply a debate on Twitter and Facebook that is instantaneous and immediate and leads to the extremes becoming the most prominent voices in that sort of media. We bring people together as they did in Ireland, as they did in the abortion debate successfully, brought people together, got people to understand the different views and what they added up to, interrogating those people who thought they had the answers to the problems, found out that the problems were different from perhaps what people had imagined, that behind Brexit rise issues about fairness, about the state of our towns, the state of our manufacturing, the condition of our country, as well as issues of immigration and sovereignty, which I believe, and I have proposals that could deal with these, and I know many other people do. But this is what we need citizens' hearings for. Political parties are not, as they used to be, the vehicle for aggregating opinion. Equally, at the same time, the social media is like a shouting match without an umpire. If we could bring people together in citizens' hearings in every region of the country, then I believe that we'd have a far more informed and better answer to some of these issues that arise. Now, the third thing I think is urgent as well. I believe that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission were absolutely right in 2016 when they said that any government, whatever government today, had to devise and publish and debate a new strategy for community relations in this country. And we've seen since then the problems that arise from anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and I've made my own suggestions about what needs to be done, and I will be speaking in the Isaiah Berlin lecture in a few weeks' time about the measures that now need to be taken to root out this problem once and for all. And we now see the rise of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. But Hope Not Hate has identified across the country the danger to community relations posed by people like Tommy Robinson and all the Old English Defence League and all these other organisations trying to whip up racial hatred in communities of our country that are under pressure for economic and other reasons. And so we need to have this new strategy, and it starts in the schools with education about cross-cultural understanding. Indeed, I've been in Lebanon, the country that's most divided country in the world. They have a better curriculum for dealing with cross-religious understanding than we have in Britain in many respects. And it starts with that, and it also leads to a discussion of what laws are necessary to deal with hate crimes in this country and whether the law needs to be changed. And I think this is an essential element of being true to British values and building a better, a fairer, a more compassionate, but obviously a less prejudiced society in our country. And the final thing I say, because I do come from Scotland, we must wake up to the fact that the Union is more at risk now and in greater danger than in 312 years of its history. It is under threat from a Scottish nationalism that has become more extreme and more determined to create completely separate institutions, a Scottish pound, to leave the UK customs union and the single market, and it's under threat from either the indifference or the antipathy of the Conservative Party, which has ceased being the Conservative and Unionist Party, as I've said, and is now the Conservative and Brexit Party. And we have got to show that if the Scottish nationalists argue as they do, that it is so damaging to the Scottish economy, and I agree with them, that to break our relationships with Europe, that 12 billion of our trade and 200,000 jobs are affected by breaking that relationship and leaving the EU customs union and leaving the EU single market. How much more damaging is it when you have 50 billion, not 14 billion of trade with the rest of the UK, 1 million jobs and not 200,000 jobs are affected, and yet the Scottish National Party don't seem to understand that you have a problem, a multifold problem, when you break relations with the rest of the UK than if you break relations with Europe. And how much more difficult is it, as we have found, difficult to disentangle a 40-year-old relationship with the rest of the European Union? How much more difficult is it to disentangle a relationship that is 300 years old and is based on integration and interdependence that is built up not just over 40 years, but over centuries? So I urge people in England to wake up to the fact that the union is at risk, but it's not just a union of economics. It's a union that has been responsible for making Britain a multinational state that depends on shared values, and these values include respect for diversity. These values include tolerance of different viewpoints. These values include being outward-looking in your view of the world and not turning in on yourself. Only a few weeks ago, we commemorated D-Day, and Scottish, Welsh, Irish, English soldiers fought together and died together and are buried together side by side in the now peaceful cemeteries of the European continent. They didn't ask each other before they fought together in the trenches what their nationality was. They fought together because they were all for a common cause. And you know, I just finished with this. If you look at the history of the world over these last 50 or 60 years, one of the most outstanding features is what happened in the space race. America and Russia fighting each other for 30 years as to who would get on the moon, as to who would be the first into orbit in the first place, and who was controlling that space in the outer hemisphere of the world. And then in the 1990s, something unique happened. Russia and America got together, 25 other nations joined them, and they formed an international space station. And they both sent astronauts up to that space station, as do other countries, including from the Middle East and from the rest of the world. And they are so interdependent on each other today that America cannot itself launch into orbit without using Russian technology. And Russia cannot man or staff the space station without American technology. Such is the interdependence that they cannot operate the International Space Station without each other. And it just makes this point. If in the most hostile conflict that the world saw in the last 50 years, and if in the most sensitive area of the world where people are fighting each other over new technology and over control of cyberspace, Russia and America, even under Trump and Putin, can find a way that they actually work together. Surely we in Britain can find a way on earth that we can work together. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England can work together for common purposes and for shared ideals. I say to you very clearly, it's not just the future of the economic union that is dependent on what we say about this and what we do about this. Given what we know about Nigel Farage and what we know about Boris Johnson and what we know about the rise of nationalism in all countries of the United Kingdom, this is about the values that inspired the Fabian Society in the first place, the values that inspire Hope Not Hate to do all the good work it does today. We must stand up for a multinational state that is tolerant, not intolerant, outward-looking, not inward-looking, inclusive and not divisive, based on respect for diversity and not on prejudice and discrimination. That is the task that if the Conservative Party will not fulfil, the Labour Party must now fulfil and do it to its best ability. Thank you very much.
I have some questions. Now, in preparation for this event yesterday, good people at the Fabian Society emailed everybody who has signed up and asked them if they wanted to ask a question. And I have a few of the really incisive ones here. But there are some privileges involved in chairing an event, and I'm going to abuse them now. So, first, Gordon, if it's okay with you, I'd like to start with my own question, if I may. So, last night, Boris Johnson did emerge from the shadows and did an interview with Laura Kuenssberg, in which he described himself as a progressive. And we know also from recent days that actually he's been in touch with Steve Bannon, the doyen of the early Trump administration, who said in relation to his influence in European politics, you just put a smart face on nationalism and you win an election. So progressive or nationalist with a, I mean, does Boris Johnson have a smart face? I don't know. Which is it? Which is Boris, really?
Well, first of all, Alison, you do a brilliant job at Parliament, and I wanted to say that Alison is one of our greatest MPs, and she's doing a fantastic
I'll
job.
pay you later.
Not just on this, and I'm not trying to avoid the question like Boris was doing on this issue, but on a whole range of issues, including on food banks, where we're going to be working together to do something about child poverty, particularly holiday hunger. Has anybody seen the video of Steve Bannon and Nigel Farage? It was shown on the Guardian website. Carol Cadwallader has done a brilliant job, and others on the Guardian bringing this together. And what this video shows is Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon, who is after all Trump's cheerleader in Europe, and regards what he is doing as the creation of populist, nationalist or nativist movements, discussing how they can have a range of popular nationalist campaigns right across Europe. And you know, it's a complete irony. He's offering the foreign funding of nativist movements. And as I said during the European election campaign about Nigel Farage, we do not know how much foreign funding is actually coming to the Brexit party, because they have got no way of stopping Russian or Malaysian or Indian or Chinese or American donations coming to their party. But what they are discussing is the rise of nativist movements and trying to incite them in every country in Europe. And we now know that Boris Johnson has been in regular contact with this guy, Steve Bannon, as well. And that Bannon is claiming that he is writing or was writing speeches for Boris Johnson. So here you have this Trump-inspired network that is extended right into Europe. They tried to interfere in the Spanish elections, which thankfully were won by the new socialist Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, who's a great guy and a friend of mine, and I believe will do extremely well. But they're trying to interfere in every election in Europe. But what lies behind this? The idea that in Europe we should be sponsoring nativist and nationalist movement is to forget the very history of Europe over the last century. That 100 million people died because of the rise and the expansion of nationalist populist movements. And it is only if we forget the evil that narrow nationalism can actually do that you can even contemplate listening to people like Steve Bannon coming from America and trying to whip up nationalist divisions in Europe. So be in no doubt about this. I could have talked this morning, and would like to talk some other time, about the rise of these nativist movements right across Europe and indeed right across the world. The Indian election, and I'm very pleased that Professor Gandhi, who's a relative of Mahatma Gandhi and his wife, are with us today at this event. But the rise of nationalism is not just a feature of Europe. And what's happened is because people are seeing that globalization is leaderless. They're seeing that globalization is faceless. There is no management of the global economy worth its name. And people are deciding that it's an uncontrollable, uncontrolled, out of control train that they cannot find any way to bring under control. And they are turning to nationalism, not to cooperation, which should be extended to deal with tax evasion, the environment, climate change, global trade, global growth. We need more cooperation, not less. But people are deciding, because the politicians have failed to ensure proper cooperation across the world, they're deciding to retreat into nationalist movements which cannot themselves solve problems that are global in their origin and have got to be solved by cooperation. So we're in not just a fight within Britain, we're in a fight within Europe, and indeed a fight that is worldwide against populist nationalist movements that are demonizing and targeting foreigners or immigrants or Europeans in this case, all people who are minorities in one country, blaming them for everything that's got wrong when it is clearly a problem of our failure to manage globalization well and to manage it properly. So Steve Bannon and Donald Trump does not like me saying this, but they are symptoms of a problem. His arrogance would not allow him ever to be thought of as a symptom of a problem. It is a symptom of a problem that we need to grapple with, and that is to manage globalization successfully in the public interest and prove to people that instead of nativist movements being given inspiration across the world, we have cooperation that will deal with climate change, deal with tax evasion, deal with inequality, therefore, deal with the failure of the world economy to recover its growth after the global recession in a way that benefited millions of people who now feel left out and left behind. So Steve Bannon is a problem, and his relationship with Donald Trump is a problem. His relationship, however, with Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage are issues that we've got to address directly in Britain.
Two words. And now, and in fact, I think we just heard, ladies and gentlemen, probably the best argument in favour of our European Union membership that there is. I'm going to come to the questions that the audience have asked us. This first one from Emerson Murphy. Given that a majority of Brexit supporters, it's thought because of polling back the so-called no-deal Brexit, in the event of another referendum, are you rather concerned about leaving that option off any ballot paper? Do you think that would fuel even more discontent?
No, I want another referendum. I want to build up to that referendum to include citizens' assemblies so that we have a chance in an informed debate and not simply a binary question to start with, and to look at the issues and for the public to hear all the issues, to interrogate the experts, to look at the arguments that have been put by both sides and interrogate also the proponents. And I believe, if people were to be exposed to the arguments about the dangers of Brexit and the risks that we entail, then their mind, in my view, would be changed. But the problem about the binary debate we've had is it's either yes or no, it's either for or against. It's fought at a level where people can just throw insults around at people and are never able to look at the facts. And that's why the Irish referendum on abortion, the Irish referendum on abortion and the preliminary to it in citizens' hearings, but what's happening in California, and Canada, and Poland, and Australia, and all sorts of countries is important. You need that informed debate. So I'm not afraid of any question of referendum. What I'm afraid of is that we don't have the informed debate in advance of it. You know, I was in a radio studio once, and there was this Brexit party, it was then the UKIP party, guy being interviewed, and the interviewer was getting really frustrated. Why are you so against the European Union? Why are you so against the European Union? And he kept asking, why are you so against it? And in frustration, he said to the UKIP party, is it ignorance or is it apathy? And the guy said, I don't know and I don't care. I'm afraid that the Brexit party are peddling untruths. They're stoking up prejudice. They're trying, as I say, to define something that is economically suicidal as a patriotic act. And the only way to puncture this is to get an informed debate within the country. And we tried under the last Labour government to have citizens' hearings in all sorts of different parts of the country on a number of issues. We tried to open up the debate with citizens' juries, all these things. But I do not think you can get to the bottom of an issue and persuade the public that these issues are complex and that they've got to be looked at in great detail unless, as a preliminary to a referendum, you have citizens' hearings. So I'm not afraid of any question. What I'm afraid of is that we don't have the degree of debate in the country. And of course, you know, I know more than anybody, the newspapers who are right-wing will influence that debate unless there are other mechanisms by which they can be heard.
Okay. Now, we're in what I think of as one of your natural habitats here, a building that belongs to a church. But I want to ask a question from Professor Stefan Sperl, which is about one of your other natural territories. What is the role? Football's to come. Education. What is the role of schools and universities in promoting an inclusive sense of identity that extends to all citizens, notwithstanding race and religion?
Yeah, my father was a Church of Scotland minister, and I was brought up in the church. And he told me he had to be very careful when he spoke in his sermons, not to tell people exactly what his views were, because there were people of all sorts of different views in his congregation listening to him. And he said a friend of him had a tactic that he used every time there was an election. So if the party that his party won, the first hymn would be, "Now thank we all our God." If the party lost, it would be, "Dear Lord and Father of mankind, forgive our foolish ways." And if a centre party or another party won, "Oh, God works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform." So you can tell not just by words, but by the choice of famous. I mentioned Lebanon. I've been in Lebanon many times. It's the most divided country in the world. Clearly, you've got extreme groups battling for power all the time, including Hezbollah. You've got Christians, you've got Muslims, you've got Shia, Shiites, Sunni. You've got a huge inter-Islam set of arguments. But for 9-year-olds in Lebanese schools, and I was involved in this, they managed to pioneer a new curriculum that taught everybody about the different religious faiths and taught people about what they had in common as well as what divided them. And at that age, to learn about a faith or a different religion that you had no knowledge of or thought were always your antagonists and thought they were always enemies of you is something that was eye-opening for the pupils and something that seemed to work in this country. So education about cross-cultural understanding is absolutely essential. The work that Hope Not Hate does amongst young people is also absolutely essential. And the desire to bring our community together and to understand each other's points of views has got to be something that we pursue not just in schools, but in colleges and universities where there have been huge issues. And I do come back not just to the issue of Islamophobia, but the issue of anti-Semitism. We have racial crimes, anti-Semitic crimes that have grown dramatically, crimes outside schools, crimes outside synagogues, crimes also, of course, on the internet, where there's been a many 1,000% rise in the hate messages against the Jewish community. We must be prepared to take action, and that includes what is happening in the schools. And the Holocaust Education Trust that I've supported over many years, and I myself have visited Auschwitz, I saw how 2 schoolgirls from my own former school in Kirkcaldy that we encouraged to go to Auschwitz, went to Auschwitz, came back with this sense that something had to be done to inform their own fellow school pupils. And they set up what they called the Anne Frank Week in Kirkcaldy, which is where my constituency was in my hometown. And they managed to have hundreds of school children coming together to look at these problems of prejudice and discrimination through the eyes of what the history of Anne Frank herself was about, but also through what they had seen at Auschwitz. And it's these sort of projects, the Holocaust Education Trust and other projects against Islamophobia, and also projects about all kinds of breakdown in relationships that are possible in a community where people are under pressure for all sorts of other reasons, that we've got to be careful to devise new means of helping from the earliest possible age people understand what it is to live in a diverse society.
Thank you. And final question, and I think this really goes to the heart of the matter of what this event today has really been about. Before I ask the question, I do want to say that obviously everybody here, if you're not a member of the Fabian Society, what have you been doing all your life? and it's where the cool kids hang out. And if you aren't already involved in giving to Hope Not Hate, then please do, as I have done, sign up to give regularly to their fund. They have done the most phenomenal work in protecting politics from the far right, and I would encourage all of you to join and support them. And so this final question, which really relates to both of those organisations and the work we do on the left of politics, standing up for progressive values. This question is from Deborah Wilson, and she asks, in your opinion, what dynamics, social, political, or security dynamics, do you attribute to the space created that has allowed for the rise of the far right in the United Kingdom?
I think that we should have had a debate about what it was to be British a long time ago. And I think we would have found that most people in Britain subscribe to the view that we are outward looking, that we are tolerant, that we believe in fairness, and we believe in a community working together. And I don't think that's trite or abstract. I actually think the problem is it's been unstated, and people have been allowed to think that you can redefine patriotism and redefine what it is to be British as being anti-foreigner, as being anti-European, as to be anti-minorities or anti-immigration within your own country. So it's the failure to be explicit about what we stand for that makes it easy for right-wing, there will always be right-wing propagandists to make headway. You see, there are two views of Britain that are competing with each other at the moment. The one is the one that I'm describing, outward-looking, engaged with the world, fairness, that takes us towards membership of the European Union and being a major player in the global society that we live in. And also, because it's not unrelated to be talking about better community relations within our country. Because if prejudice starts against foreigners, it equally spreads to minorities within your own country. But you see, there is this other view of Britain that was really prominent in the Brexit debate, and let's be honest, won the Brexit debate. And it wasn't about economics, it was about emotion. It was about this idea of Britain, you are better standing alone. You're better standing aloof from the world, detached. The Dunkirk spirit, they misinterpreted Dunkirk as if Britain was always best and most successful when it stood alone, forgetting that we didn't stand alone out of choice, we stood alone out of necessity. And the very time at Dunkirk that we were standing alone, Churchill was offering the French a merger, and he was desperate to get America to come in and support us in the war. And so this myth about our history, it's also in that film, Dunkirk, of course, that we stood alone, and there was no, the only Frenchmen that were involved in that film were sort of betraying their country. I mean, that sort of myth that is created by these films as well, that somehow we are better standing alone, standing aloof, detached from the world, and that's what it is to be a true British citizen. And it means also that you become hostile to immigrants and hostile to people in your own country. So you cannot succeed in persuading a new generation of people and even persuading the older generation if you don't have a debate on these issues. If you don't argue that intolerance is not what is in the... In fact, we were the first country in the world, let's be honest, to practice toleration. And we were the champions of liberty before many other countries in the world. But more important, we were the champions of being outward-looking, despite all the difficulties of empire and everything else. This idea that as an island state, we had to be outward-looking and we had to be engaged with the rest of the world. So I think the secret to this is actually being explicit about what we stand for, not allowing others to hijack what it is to be British and what it is to be patriotic, insisting that actually being British is about the respect for diversity and inclusiveness and not being hostile to either immigrants or foreigners. And if we had that debate in this country, I'm absolutely sure that the British people are more tolerant, they're more outward-looking, they're more progressive in their ideas about fairness, and they're more against discrimination and prejudice than the government that is ruling over us at the moment. And the challenge is to make sure that these voices are heard in the next few weeks, because we are facing a huge battle to stop a no-deal Brexit. And I hope everybody will engage in this, not just because of the economics, but because it tells us something about what kind of country we are to be, not to be hijacked by a version of patriotism that requires you to perform an act of economic self-harm on yourself to justify what it is to be British. And of course, it's going to be tested in what we do on community relations and tested to how we promote the case for fairness right across our country. So the debate has got to be had. The Fabians are important to this. Hope, not hate. And all of you, and we need to show that to be British in the modern world is not to be isolationist and insular, is to be engaged with the world and to promote a sense of international cooperation and the reality of it in every part of the world against the populist nationalists that Donald Trump and others represent. That's the challenge for us, and I hope we can meet and master it in the next few months. Thank you.
There has been too little that we have felt proud of. But if after listening to that, you don't feel proud to be British, then I don't know what more can be said. Ladies and gentlemen, he says we have to master the challenge. I say he is the master. Could you please just thank him once more?
Thank you.